Some people just know they could save hundreds on car insurance by checking Allstate first. Like, to check the Jumbotron first, before attempting to eat a stack of Supreme nachos in one bite. Now you're just a meme that everyone shares on game day. Checking first is smart, so check Allstate first for a quote that could save you hundreds. You're in good hands with Allstate. Savings vary, subject to terms, conditions, and availability. Allstate Fire and Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates, Northbrook, Illinois.
I was never really a runner. The way I see running is a gift, especially when you have stage 4 cancer. I'm Anne. I'm running the Boston Marathon, presented by Bank of America. I run for Dana-Farber Cancer Institute to give people like me a chance to thrive in life, even with cancer.
Join Bank of America in helping Anne's cause. Give if you can at BofA.com/supportAnne. What would you like the power to do? References to charitable organizations is not an endorsement by Bank of America Corporation. Copyright 2025.
Springfest and Ego Days are here at Lowe's. Right now, get a free Select Ego 56-volt battery with purchase of a Select trimmer, blower, or mower kit. Plus, shop today for new and exclusive items you need for your lawn. So get ready for spring with the latest in innovation from Ego, the #1 rated brand in cordless outdoor power. Only at Lowe's. We help, you save. Offer valid through 4/2. Selection varies by location while supplies last.
Hello and welcome to the Paddock and The Pavilion with me, your host, Stephen Wallace. On today's show, former England international Roland Butcher returns to reflect on India's triumph in the recent Champions Trophy. Roland shares his in-depth thoughts on what went wrong for England, both with bat and ball, along with his take on who should be their new white ball captain. All that and more with Roland's expert insight coming up next. Hello, Roland. Good to see you back on Zoom to chat about the 2025 Champions Trophy.
Yes, Stephen, good to see you. And as usual, always a great pleasure to be on your show and really looking forward to the conversation.
Well, to start with, we must begin with your predictions because although you didn't give me the overall winner, you got the 4 semi-finalists for the 2025 Champions Trophy.
Yeah, well, that's very satisfying. And, to come up with those predictions, I think it was based really on what I felt the teams were doing at the time and before they approached the Champions Trophy. Their form, etc., was things that I looked at. So the 4 semi-finalists, I really felt that those would be the 4 to come out of the groups, which obviously would have been Australia, New Zealand, India, and South Africa. I thought, based on what has been happening over the last year or so, those teams were, the better performing teams. Obviously, you noticed England was not in that group of 4. And that was because I felt really the way England were playing over that period and really didn't have a settled team, that they would find it very difficult to get out of that group, and it proved to be.
Well, those were your exact words. You said England were in a tough group. And you also said keep an eye out for New Zealand. They may surprise you. Yeah.
I mean, listen, New Zealand don't have so-called out-and-out stars, they do have star players, but, not people that sort of grab the headlines like some other places, or they're not feted like other superstars. But what they do have is a collective group of very dedicated professionals who always punch above their weight. And, I just felt with a bit of luck that, they could have gone all the way. And, they did as I thought they would. Thought they would surprise a number of teams and did very well.
Before we go into detail about the Champions Trophy and India's win, the favourites by 4 wickets in the final against New Zealand, how would you sum up the whole tournament?
Well, I think the tournament, I guess, obviously would have been very disappointing for a number of sides. Obviously, some of the teams were missing, which, like the West Indies and others, which perhaps would have helped, added a little bit more spice to the tournament. But I think overall, the tournament really favoured those 4 sides. I felt really sorry for Pakistan, who, number one, were the host of the tournament. Really didn't have a settled enough team or good enough team to go a long way in the tournament. And then also after that, didn't have the chance to host the final. So that was quite disappointing. So I think overall, the feelings Champions Trophy would have been mixed feelings.
Let's begin by focusing on England. 2 scores of over 300, but 3 defeats, the only side to lose all of their matches. What went wrong for England?
I think England's form leading into the Champions Trophy was a big telltale sign that they were going to struggle. Then when you add to that, what they were relying on was pace, which was always going to be a bit of a problem in India. The quicker you are on those white ball pitches, the more you disappear. And I didn't think England's strategy of having all of those fast bowlers would prove successful, and it didn't. You'd probably find that the fast bowlers in Wood, Archer, I think Cass got injured, and others were very, very expensive. And, if those were your main bowlers that you're expecting to do the bulk of the bowling and restrict sides for going the distance, then that put extra pressure on a fairly fragile batting lineup as well. So I think form going into this Champions Trophy did not favour England. They were always going to be on the back foot. I think England fans would have supported them because they're England fans, but I think deep down, a lot of them would have rationalised that this team really would not be good enough to win the Champions Trophy.
On the subject of pace bowling, I've got a question from David Fountain. He asks, is England's reliance on pace in limited overs cricket a bit outdated?
I think it depends on where you're playing and the conditions. I think in India, they were going to, and in India and in Pakistan pitches are good for batting. So, they would always prepare pitches that are going to favour batting. Good fast bowling in Test match cricket in those places is something very desirable to have. But in the limited format, you can travel, especially if you haven't had a lot of cricket yourselves. So the likes of Archer and Wood of recent times haven't played a lot of cricket. So, I really thought that they would struggle to try and adjust to the different types of pitches. And so it proved. And, it was unfortunate, but you could see it coming.
Did they need a bit more variety, a left armour like Topley or Sam Curran and another spinner, frontline spinner?
Yeah, I think when they look back, perhaps they will feel that, the strategy they went with was perhaps not the right one. They would have thought it was the right one at the time, but as it proved, I don't think it was. I think they perhaps would say to themselves, yes, maybe, if we had included, as you said, a left armour, maybe another spinner, would that have made a difference? It may have made a little difference. I really didn't fancy that this England team really was in a right frame of mind to beat the bigger teams in this Champions Trophy.
What did you think to Jofra's bowling? He got 6 wickets. He took some early wickets in 2 of the games.
Yeah, he did, but he was very expensive. Someone of his ability and pace, you're expecting not just only to take early wickets, but you're expecting him to come back in the middle, keep it tight, also pick up wickets, and then at the death be very stingy with his bowling. That was not the case. There were a couple of games where he got early wickets, but generally, he travelled quite a lot, actually.
And what do you think to the England approach of going so hard in the power play? We in the first game we were 43 for 2 after 5 overs. Second game 30 for 2 after 6, and the third game against South Africa 37 for 3 after 6.
Well, that approach doesn't always work, does it? It's an approach that has been adopted by the England side for a number of years. I am not sure what the discussions were going into this Champions Trophy. As you know, there's a new coach on board who's come across from the Test side, in Brendan McCullum. Does he want the team to play in 50-over cricket the same as they do in Test cricket? That's really something you will get to find out. But I really felt England's real problem was, lack of readiness for a tournament like this. That was a real problem, and and really some disjointed performances. I don't think you could have looked at the side and say, well, look, we're going to get a solid batting performance, we're going to get a solid bowling performance, we're going to be outstanding in the field, and we've got a good chance. I think it was more of hope. You were hoping that the batting would come off. You were hoping the bowling would come off, and also in the field they were not at their best.
The only two England batsmen that came off, but in quite a big way, were Ben Duckett and Joe Root, who both scored centuries.
Yeah, two very good players. I mean, we know Joe Root's pedigree. He's a proven player for a very long time. Continues to do what he does best, which is to bat and take his game and the game of cricket to a different level. Duckett also was very, very good, but to win a tournament like the Champions Trophy against top great sides, you need more than two batters really performing at their max. And unfortunately for England, that just didn't happen. And the reliance was on those two, and with the fragile bowling lineup, it was just too much pressure.
But against Australia, we got 350. Should we have just got a few more in that game?
Well, you can say that now. I mean, always, hindsight's 20/20 vision, but 350 is a pretty good score. But I never ever felt that they would defend it. I spent a lot of time in discussion with my cousin Ralph. He was in England at the time, Derbyshire's exec member, and we always talk cricket on a daily basis. And when England scored 350, my reaction to him was, "It's not enough." And that really was based on where England was at the moment in terms of their overall cricket.
Yes, it was that English born in Leeds, Josh Inglis, who got the runs.
Yes, he did, and he took the right time to step up. And you would have always expected that Australia would have made a good account of themselves. The pitch was going to be as good, and England can get 350. Australia would back themselves to get it. So there was never any doubt about that. The question really was going to be whether the England bowling attack would have been good enough to restrict them from getting it. Australia always would have chased down that target and felt confident that they could get it. And so it proved.
Talking about selection, what were your thoughts of moving Jamie Smith up to number 3? He hadn't played many ODIs before.
I think that was a monumental mistake. I think for the team and really for Jamie Smith. I think Smith is better off batting down the order where there's less responsibility. He's still very early in his career, so he's not an established player like Joe Root that he can move up and down the order. Joe Root will be able to adapt in all of those positions. I thought Jamie Smith's elevation was really one of hope. I don't think you could say with any certainty that he was going to be successful, and it proved that way. I'm not saying in the future that he could not become the player to bat high up in the order, but I think certainly in this competition, and to give him the best chance of succeeding, he really should have batted down the order. And that also was a problem for England because there were not a lot of low order runs coming into the team.
And is Phil Salt more a T20 player than he is an ODI player?
I think Salt can play both parts. Listen, everyone can have a bad tournament. If you think back over the last year or two, I mean, Salt has been pretty dominant as an England player. I think he deserved this opportunity. I would hate to feel that after the Champions Trophy's failure that they would move on from him in 50-over cricket. I think he's got the ability to play both forms, and you should persevere with him. Everybody's entitled to have a bad series.
I've got a question now from the former England over 60s captain, who you know well, Richard Merriman. He sent a question in: where do England go from here, and why have the wheels come off?
Well, that's a very good question, Richard. And first of all, I hope you've enjoyed the winter and looking forward to the start of the new season. Where do England go from here? I think they've got to take a deep look at what happened in the Champions Trophy and be very honest with themselves and, decide, were we good enough? Have we got the players that can do better? Or do we need to, reshape this team maybe have some rougher times to come to start with, and maybe in the future, 2 or 3 years' time, have a very good side. I think those are the questions that the coach and others will have to discuss, whether they back these players or whether they introduce new players and wait for them to come through. I think that is one thing for sure that has to happen. I believe really the team needs to transition now, really, because I don't think people like Mark Wood and Joe Farage are going to be around, forever. You've got to be thinking, well, who are the players to take over from these guys that will take us forward the next 2 or 3 years? All of those things they've got to look at. I'm not saying that those guys are finished, because, in the right conditions, they're very much a handful. And I would imagine that England will be hoping that the two of them can remain fit for the Ashes coming up at the end of the year, because, there could be a real asset down under when the Ashes series starts. So I expect to see a rebuilding of the team, Richard. They may even give you a call now that you have retired as captain. I'm sure you're probably, after a year out of the game now, probably wanting to come back and play. So, maybe you should put your name in the ring and drop Brendan McCullum a line.
Well, that's one area where England do need a new captain following Josh Butler's resignation. Perhaps not Richard Merriman, but who do you think it will be?
I think at this stage now you've only got two options, really. You've either got Duckett or, go back to Joe Root as a short-term steerer of the ship for now until you identify someone else. There are not too many options available, I don't think, at this moment.
You don't think Harry Brook then is future England captain?
Future. I would say no. I think Harry Brook has to, certainly in the white ball game, has to concentrate on his game right now. If he can do that, then obviously he's a real asset to the team, as he's been certainly in the Test arena. I wouldn't want to burden him at this point when he's not really a top line white ball player yet. To burden him with the captaincy, with a team that will be rebuilding as well. I think it needs a little bit more experience. So, as I said, Joe Root could be a short-term candidate. Duckett seemed to have got several parts of his games right in Test cricket and white ball cricket. So, it's possible that he may be able to handle the pressure. But to give someone like Brook that pressure, I don't really feel that would be good for him or for England cricket.
You think it should come from within the team, not someone from outside, which has been mentioned?
Well, first of all, you've got to get into the team. So who from the outside is guaranteed a player? If somebody on the outside was good enough, they would be in the team now. But they're not. So the first thing somebody has to do from the outside is get into the sides. So I can't really see them picking up a captain from outside and implanting him into the team as leader with no history. You're just taking a risk, which is not a calculated risk.
Would you consider a separate T20 captain and a separate ODI captain, or do you feel as though it should be a white ball captain?
I don't have a problem with the separation. I think they're two totally different games. The 50-over game is more like a test match, because the teams that get bowled out in less than that. West Indies were bowled out in 26 overs against Pakistan, and then 36 in the next. So it's very much the 50-over game is very much like a first innings of a test match. So I think you need two different type of captains. T20 is obviously very fast-paced, and the captain has to think very, very quickly in terms of his movements. The 50-over, as I said, because of the length of the game, you've got times to really consider strategies down the line in the game, which you don't have in T20 cricket, because, right from the off, your plans can be destroyed, and suddenly you've got to switch from your original plan into something else. So it takes two different types of captains, and maybe England should do just that, just separate the two, have two different captains for the two formats.
So your short-term suggestion would be, say, for 12 months?
Yeah, I listen, I would have Joe Root back as captain, with Duckett as his understudy, with the view that Duckett will take over. And, when Duckett eventually takes over, by that time, Brooke or someone else would have matured a little bit more, and then perhaps move into the vice captaincy position. That's what I would envisage. But who am I to say what they will actually do?
What are your thoughts then on Josh Butler's term as captain? It was a hard act to follow, following Owen Morgan.
Well, very hard, because he was a vital part of the Owen Morgan era as a player. So, for him to play that sort of cricket under Owen Morgan and then expected to play the same sort of cricket as captain under his leadership, with the team that is changing, was always going to be a tall order. He will tell you that regardless, he would have taken on the challenge as captain, and I think he should, and he did, and he tried his best. But, in reality, the expectation was always going to be greater than the results. And so it proved. And, in the end, with him batting down the order, I've always felt his value to any side is at the top of the order, because, he can destroy a ball in attack and get them under the defensive very quickly. He hasn't had a lot of experience batting down the order. And that's something that, you need experience doing that. It's not something that you just do. So, but yeah, he's had his time, and, I think he did the right thing in stepping down.
Without the pressure of leadership, could his performances get back to what they were under Morgan's leadership?
I think it depends on his appetite for the game. Does he still have the appetite to play international white ball cricket? Is he motivated to still be one of the best? If the answers to those questions are yes, and and he's putting the performances in, then by all means. Questions were asked when Joe Root lost the captaincy. Would he be as potent as a player after losing the captaincy? Well, we have the answer to that. His game has stepped up, because his desire, his motivation still to play, to perform at that level, has remained the same or even become greater. So, there's an example of somebody who can do it. I think if Butler has something left in the tank and he really wants to go for it, he could also still be a very good short-term player for the team.
At Sierra, discover great deals on top brand workout gear, like high-quality walking shoes, which might lead to another discovery.
40,000 steps, baby. Who's on top now, Karen?
You've taken the office step challenge a step too far. Don't worry, though. Sierra also has yoga gear. It might be a good place to find your zen. Discover top brands at unexpectedly low prices. Sierra, let's get moving.
Eczema isn't always obvious, but it's real. And so is the relief from Ebglyss. After an initial dosing phase of 16 weeks, about 4 in 10 people taking Ebglyss achieved itch relief and clear or almost clear skin. And most of those people maintain skin that's still more clear at 1 year with monthly dosing.
Ebglyss, lebrikizumab, LBKZ, a 250 milligram per 2 milliliter injection, is a prescription medicine used to treat adults and children 12 years of age and older who weigh at least 88 pounds or 40 kilograms with moderate to severe eczema, also called atopic dermatitis, that is not well controlled with prescription therapies used on the skin or topicals, or who cannot use topical therapies. Ebglyss can be used with or without topical corticosteroids. Don't use if you're allergic to Ebglyss. Allergic reactions can occur that can be severe. Eye problems can occur. Tell your doctor if you have new or worsening eye problems. You should not receive a live vaccine when treated with Ebglyss. Before starting Ebglyss, tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection.
Searching for real relief? Ask your doctor about Ebglyss and visit ebglyss.lilly.com or call 1-800-LILY-RX or 1-800-545-5979.
I think I just won my taxes.
Yeah?
I just switched to H&R Block in about 1 minute. All I had to do was drag and drop last year's return into H&R Block, and bam, my information is automatically there.
So I don't have to go digging around for all my old papers to switch?
Nope.
Sounds like we just leveled up our tax game.
Switching to H&R Block is easy. Just drag and drop your last return. It's better with Block.
Let's move on to the winners of the tournament, India. No Bumrah, no Pant. They still managed to win the tournament and win all 5 matches.
Yeah, they were always going to be favourite, but, they also had a tremendous amount of luck in that, all of their games were played in Dubai. So, which was a huge advantage to them. If people say it wasn't, then I'm not sure what cricket they were watching, but that's a huge advantage because the teams that had to play in Pakistan travel to Dubai, travel back. All of that is a problem for them. India didn't have to do that; they just had to travel from the hotel to the ground and back. So they had a huge advantage. They were always going to be one of the favourites to win the tournament, but I think that additional advantage certainly assisted them.
I better mention my friend Andy Bays now, who asked the question that you've already asked, and he wanted your opinion on India playing all their games at one venue with no travelling. You've answered the question for him, so thank you for that. They did lose every toss, so they did have some disadvantage.
Well, listen, is it a disadvantage to lose a toss in familiar conditions? Because as the tournament went on, whoever came to play in Dubai, apart from the disadvantages of having to travel and the upheaval, etc., they would not have known the conditions like India would. So if you're playing every game at a particular venue, you get to understand, when is the best time to bat, when is the best time to bowl spinners, if there's dew, etc. You get information that most of the other teams don't get because you're there all the time. So huge disadvantage to all the other sides. Losing the toss really didn't make a difference because, India are a very good side. There's no question about that. Very well balanced batters, good middle order batters, fast bowlers, spinners. So, they're a good team in any conditions. I mean, they may have won it. They probably would have won it in Pakistan as well because they're that good a team. But I think the shine was taken off really because of where they had to play.
Where it must have helped was with their squad selection because they only had to provide players for one venue.
Yeah. I mean, that's very important because, if you've got that situation where I know that I'm playing at this venue, my squad really doesn't change a huge difference once you understand the conditions and realize that there's not going to be a lot of change, then it makes your squad selection very, very easy. All credit to India. I give them great credit for winning because, they would have also understood the pressure of playing in Dubai and what people were thinking about them, etc. They were able to rise above that and give the level of performances that you expect from an India team, particularly coming back from the disappointing performances in Australia, where they were completely outplayed by the Australians in the cricket they had before that. That would have given them some satisfaction to actually come and win this tournament. But I would have thought right from the off, they were one of the favourites, if not the favourite, to win the tournament.
Even though they only won the final with 1 over to spare, were you always confident they would get past New Zealand's 251?
Yeah, I always felt, that, I felt New Zealand would do well in the tournament, but I felt that, the team to beat really would have been India, to start with. I thought Australia would have been in there with a shake as well. But as you saw, Australia team had a lot of familiar faces misses. So, it was going to be difficult for them, for all the young players coming into that team to suddenly step up and be, top draw at a major tournament. So, but, you always feel that Australia, with their fighting spirit, they're always in with a shout. So I was going India, certainly Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa were the ones really to look at. But India would have been edging I think all of them as a team to beat.
One team we haven't mentioned, Afghanistan. Ibrahim Zadran's 177 against England was a superb innings.
Yeah, absolutely superb. Listen, Afghanistan's cricket, has come on, leaps and bounds. They're a very formidable side in all forms of the game. They're very, very serious cricketers. If you take your mind back to middle of last year, don't forget, really, for me, the only thing that stopped Afghanistan from getting to the final of the World Cup was a treacherous pitch in Trinidad and Tobago, where they lost the toss on a real devil of a pitch against South Africa, and then were blown away by South African fast bowlers. Up to that point, they had played magnificent cricket and deserved to be in the final. Again, I felt very sorry for them that night when I saw that when they lost that toss. I thought they have no chance here. But if you follow their cricket, they're really playing some very good cricket. Batters are doing well. We know what their spin bowlers, the faster bowlers are doing. Credit to the game at the moment, Afghanistan. They're showing the smaller nations what is possible. If you truly believe and want to be, a top team, that is possible.
Yes, in that game against England, they were 37 for 3.
Yeah, of course. But listen, if you have great belief in the side within your team, you always believe you can come back from setbacks. That's one of the great strengths of like an Australian team that, when in trouble, somebody always puts their hand up and pull them out of trouble. And that only comes because of the belief within the team that regardless of the situation, we can recover from this. I think Afghanistan are beginning to develop, that sort of idea within their game. And they don't have a lot of players, but the players that they do have, they all seem to be a credit to the team.
From what you're saying, and they're already starting to do this, they could go close to winning one of these tournaments in the next 10 years.
Well, I would certainly hope before then, because in 10 years' time, this group of players will be as old as you and me. But, I think they could go very, very close in the next couple of years. In the right conditions and with a bit of luck, they could definitely do that.
Well, the next T20 World Cups in India and Sri Lanka, and the next Champions Trophy in 2029 is in India. What do you think, though, to the Champions Trophy tournament? 19 days, 15 matches. Do you like the tournament?
I think it's a bit too short, really. It's a lot of pressure to, ask highly tuned professionals who play at a very high tempo to do that in such a short space of time. I think it's too much for the players. I understand why these days, they have to cram things in because there's so many other things happening that the international calendar is extremely busy. But I hope that they have a little bit more respect for the players and their longevity and fitness, and space out these tournaments a bit longer so the players can get proper rest and recuperation, get over niggles, and then play good, high-quality cricket. I think for me that's more important than to rushing through a tournament where players are fatigued or half injured. I prefer to see fully fit players giving of their best.
And that's exemplified with the Australians missing out of Hazelwood, Stark and Cummins from their side.
Of course, because they've got a lot of cricket coming up, this year, and obviously culminating with that Ashes series at the back end of the year. They're coming to the Caribbean in June, and I would expect to see Hazelwood, Cummins and Stark on that. Obviously it's the beginning of a new cycle of World Championship cricket, so points are at stake. Those guys will be refreshed and ready for that series, and then that will be a prelude to just getting fine-tuned for when England come down under later on this year. So Australia did well. I mean, they realized that, listen, you can't be if you've got 3 champion bowlers, you cannot keep playing them over and over and over in every format. You know, something will give. So, you know, the best thing to do would be to look at the tournaments. They would have looked at the Champions League trophy and thought, well, what are our chances of winning that? You know, also weigh that up against what we've got coming up during the rest of the year. And they would have made that decision to rest those players, and they're important players to the team.
What's the future like then for 50-over cricket? I know you like the format.
Listen, I think, you know, there should be a future for it. I like 50-over cricket because, you know, it is closer to the longer form of the game. I don't think only that T20 cricket cannot be good for the world game. If you only play T20 cricket around the world, then the associate countries players will not develop that well if they're only playing T20 cricket. I think 50-over cricket certainly helps the associate teams because you have to learn how to bat and bowl over a longer period. Then you could always translate that into the T20 format. So certainly, I think the ODI needs to continue, and if the associates need to play more ODIs for me than T20s if they really want to be good competitors for places in the World Cup in the future.
Well, England certainly agree. We've got 3 ODIs against West Indies and 3 ODIs against South Africa during this summer.
Yeah, well, that's the start of England's rebuild. I mean, they know that. Listen, the accusation by many writers and reporters and fans have been that, England really have not paid a lot of attention to the 50-over game. A lot of their players haven't played much of it over an extended period. So they've got to get back on track. So they need to play more games. They need to play more games so that when major tournaments come around, you've got something in the bag. You've got some mileage in the bag. I think what happened to England, they just didn't have that mileage. It's plain and simple.
Thank you very much, Roland, for your opinions on the 2025 Champions Trophy. And you will be back soon in another podcast talking about your latest developments with your autobiography.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, always a pleasure having a discussion with you. The Champions Trophy, as you know, is one of the major tournaments in world cricket, obviously leading up to the IPL. So obviously a lot of interest was in the Champions Trophy. And obviously congratulations to India, who, again proved that even though they're down, at some point they can pick themselves up because of the quality that exists within the team to be champions. So looking forward to the next discussion.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Check engine light on? Take the guesswork out of your check engine light with O'Reilly Veriscan. It's free. Ask for O'Reilly Veriscan today.